future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
And greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Judy, WTF. I am your host, Walt Lusk, and of course in studio as usual is Dr. Judy Rosenberg, a full-time therapist, and a psychologist. We are broadcasting live at the Sunset Gower Studios here in Hollywood. It is just an amazing, amazing place, and part of the UBN Radio Network. You can pull us on Stitcher, iTunes, or directly from ubnradio.com. And we're going to go do a really, really exciting series for the next 9 weeks. Mm-hmm. Judy has developed a mind map, and guess how many panels it has? It's got 9. So we are going, and she's about ready to finish her book, Healing Human Disconnect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so for the next 9 weeks, we are going to delve into each panel in a very more in-depth. And for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the listeners. And this is a call-in show also. So if you want to get on the couch of Dr. Judy, feel free. The number is area code 323-843-2826. And stay tuned toward the end of the show. We do what we do every single show is we shrink that tune. And what that means is we take a popular tune, and yes, we do take requests, and you can send those to info@drjudywtf.com. And we read the lyrics. Dr. Judy interprets the lyrics through her mind map, and then, of course, we play the song. WTF, what does that stand for?
What the? Go ahead.
Freud.
Thank you, Walt.
Yes, could be Walt the Fun, but what the Freud?
It's that, too. Walt the Fun. I like that a lot.
Well, thank you very much. I'm a fun guy, but not anything. I don't have any fun guys. So today we are going to deal with panel 1 of Dr. Judy's mind map, and basically it centers around the cause or the wound.
Right, and just a little background on the mind map for those of you who have never heard of the Be the Cause mind map, which is really geared toward healing human disconnect. And when we're disconnected from, we go into pain. And when we're disconnected from in the first few years of our childhood, we often, very often, mostly form symptoms around that wound. So today we're going to go right into the wound of childhood, and panel 1 represents the connection, or rather the disconnection, or actually both the connection and the disconnection between mother and infant, because this is our first line of connect-disconnect. So if we're going to be talking about wounds of disconnect, then we have to start with the cause.
Yes, we do.
It's
the
always
cause for being disconnected.
Right, and so just take it from the beginning. When we are born into the world, we are disconnecting physically from the mother's body. And so the first disconnect is the birthing process. And a lot of my patients have wounds just from that experience alone. Some mothers have premature infants, and these babies are needing to be put in incubators.
And we actually had a show that touched on incubator babies, if you want to go back and listen.
Yes, and what I'm finding is that I have a population of patients who I call my incubator babies, and these are the people who had to go from the womb right into an incubator, and this is a serious disconnect because what we need to form a healthy human psyche is we need touch consistently, we need eye contact, we need breast milk, we need to hear mother's heartbeat, we need to be mostly attuned to consistently. What do I mean by attunement? Attunement means that mother puts the baby's needs before her own needs. So when baby cries, mother responds. When baby wets her pants or whatever, makes poo-poo in the pants, quick response. And by attuning to the baby's needs, the baby gets the sense that he or she is safe. So the first disconnect is the birthing process, and now we're learning that this birthing process can be made much more beautiful and be made to be much more of a connected experience by really taking the system into consideration and knowing that the mother and the father are truly the unit. And as father nourishes the nourisher and nurtures the nurturer, then we have the woman who's able to give more because the father's supplying the love and the support. So if you look at it from the point of view of a system, then right from the get-go, the correct system that the child needs, the baby infant needs to really have that sense of safety is a really strong dyad. A parental dyad.
Ooh, there's a word.
Yeah, I have to, put a couple of intellectual words in there. Get your thesaurus out, Walt.
Yes.
So,
believe me, I've whipped that sucker out a lot of times.
You have, right, right. So when you're talking about the birthing process, we now see that mothers and infants can unfortunately disconnect from each other when the mother, for example, is needing to have a C-section and she cannot be present emotionally for her baby after
just after the birth.
The birth, because she's in too much pain and they have to whisk the baby away to the nursery and so on. And now they're learning that giving birth with the placenta intact and the umbilical cord intact, they call that a lotus birth. Now we're getting really into doing it the most correct way possible. And so now the backlash is going the other way, that we've got to keep everything intact. And so now mothers are learning that they can give birth. They can give birth to the placenta and leave that umbilical cord to throb and to really deliver all of the antibodies necessary for the baby to start life with these healthy elements.
Whoa, how long is this umbilical cord supposed to be attached?
Well, look, some doctors cut right away.
Yes.
Okay, and some people choose to literally, I've seen pictures of this, okay, they literally have a tray where they put the placenta in the tray and they carry the tray along their sides so that eventually the umbilical cord falls off. And so there are different levels of disconnect here. But what I'm really going to delve into is beyond the birthing process. There are many wounds that occur throughout life, and particularly in the first few months and years of life.
And some of those wounds are called infiltrations, as you'll hear in a moment. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from her new book.
Okay. Go ahead.
You're
Are you going to do that now?
Yeah, we can, whenever you're ready.
Go ahead.
I'm ready.
Okay.
This is actually from Chapter 1, Panel 1, entitled The Wound of Judy's book, which will be entitled
Healing Human Disconnect.
Okay. So, and Judy has no idea what I'm going to read. This is going to be a surprise.
But I did, have something to do with it, so it can't be that much of a surprise.
No,
Go ahead.
Imagine infiltrations as, quote, the psychological virus that attack our sense of self, our health, and our well-being. Not unlike physical viruses that seek to destroy the body's defenses system, infiltrations act like an army assaulting the stronghold of your self-conception and slaughtering it with every means of arsenal: lies, fabrications, half-truths, deceptions, misrepresentations, and myths. Fending off these deeply rooted feelings of neglect, depravity, abuse, these mercenary infiltrations have but one mission: to annihilate your sense of self-worth and leave a gaping, quote, hole in the soul where joy once lived. The hole in the soul is that treacherous emptiness of self-loathing buried in the depths of our being. Like a malignant tumor, it's fed and fueled by human disconnect, the basis of all inorganic psychotherapy.
Psychopathology.
And psychopathology. Okay. I think, see, she wrote it.
Thank you so much.
The yearning and longing for unconditional love wired deep within us by Source, which is, of course, our higher power, God, universe, remains unquenched, leaving us feeling abandoned, forsaken, and starved.
Thank you for that. Really
So that's
appreciate
a
it.
couple of paragraphs of the first chapter of Dr. Judy's book. Will be out in a couple of months. She's just putting the finishing touches on. But I thought I would start there as far as an intro of the wound. And we always talk about the hole in the soul.
And Walt, you have such an amazing voice. How would you like to do an audio version of this?
Sure, I'd be happy to read it.
I would love you to do that.
Oh, I'd be honored.
So, The Hole in the Soul, which is what our series is called, the Hole in the Soul series, and the word infiltrations. And let me expand on that a little bit. So, as you heard, infiltrations is that army that infiltrates us. It's like a psychological virus. And infiltrations are multi-generational in nature. Multi-generational, meaning that they are passed down from one generation to the next. So when we are wounded in childhood, be assured that our mothers and our fathers and our ancestors are also wounded, and they pass down these wounds to us. So I want to talk a little bit about two types of wounds. The first type being overt wounds, and covert wounds, acts of omission and acts of commission.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's an act of omission? Whoops, I forgot to feed my baby when my baby was crying. Oops, I forgot to pay attention to my baby when she was smiling, and so therefore she stopped smiling.
Oops, I forgot to change the baby because the box said up to 7 pounds, and I misunderstood what the 7 pounds meant.
Right. Okay, so those are acts of omission, meaning that we're not doing something that we need to be doing. Now, the commission part is more flagrant abuse. Commission might be literally hurting your baby, literally burning, scathing, and we have all kinds of horrific examples of really intense
child abuse.
Yeah, go ahead and
What's
read
interesting is a
going on.
correlation is this month, April, is actually National Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a big deal from actually the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention are conducting some stuff. But there's some very interesting facts. This stuff's tough. I was doing some research. This is tough. Facts about child maltreatment. Okay, they're really trying to water it down already. Okay. According to the Child Protective Services agencies, more than 686,000 children were victims of maltreatment in 2012.
And that's just in the United States?
In just the United States alone. Another 1,640 children died in the United States in 2012 from abuse and neglect. Now, of course, those are the ones that they know about, right?
Right.
The financial cost for the victims in society is quite substantial. A recent CDC study showed that the total lifetime estimate fiscal cost associated with just 1 year confirmed cases of child maltreatment is up to $124 billion with a B.
Wow.
Now, there's many types of child maltreatment, and the four types to talk about are physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and neglect. Now, physical abuse basically, of course, is the use of physical force, hitting, kicking, shaking, burning, or any other shows of force against a child. Sexual abuse, of course, is in about 10% of the cases, and includes behaviors such as fondling, penetration, or exposing a child to other sexual activities. Emotional abuse refers to behaviors that harm a child's self-worth or emotional well-being. Includes, of course, name-calling, shaming, rejection, withholding love, and threatening. And then lastly, neglect. Meet the child's basic physical and emotional needs: housing, food, clothing, education, and access to medical care.
And one of my heroes is John Bowlby, Dr. John Bowlby, who is the father of attachment theory, and he talks about secure attachment and anxious attachment and different styles of attachment, and he studied orphans back in England in the early 1900s and found that babies who are not touched fail to thrive. And if you've ever seen a baby who's given up, it's really, really, really sad to see a baby stop crying, because when a baby's in distress and crying, there's still hope there, isn't there? The baby wants something.
It's reaching out.
Is reaching out.
Right, and the best way it knows how to do.
Right, and once the baby stops reaching out, that baby is really in trouble, because that baby understands that there's nobody out there. And so one of the terms that we talk about here on the show, is the concept of the double dungeon. And so,
and the double dungeon, it basically is the relationship you have or don't have with your mother is a reflection of your inner world, and the relationship you do or don't have with your father is a relation of your reflection of your outer world. And if you didn't have a good relationship with either one, double dungeon.
Right. So in terms of the first panel, and if you're near a computer, go to the website, which is
www.drjudywtf.com.
And you will see on the website panel 1, which I call the wound, and panel 1 actually is used by me in therapy as a metaphor. And one of the ways that I use it is, it looks to me like an occluded eye. And the occlusion, if we can take it to another level, is the I, meaning me, is now fractured. And because we formed the sense of ourself through the eyes of our mothers, and now we're learning that the fovea and the eye contact is such an important part of the emotional feeding mechanism. So when the mother is absent, when the gaze is not there to create a holding environment between the baby and the mother and have that connection going, the baby, who is like a sponge, sponging in the experience of the world.
They are sponging everything. In fact, let me give you an example. I was listening to a tape today of a gentleman speaking, and he met a lady who, as an infant, a mother really didn't have a lot of money, and not enough money to buy food and milk. And she gave up asking for food because she could actually sense the stress in the mother, that she didn't want to cause any more stress. So she just went hungry and didn't cry anymore because she realized it wasn't going to do any good, and she didn't want to experience the stress and feel it because she couldn't talk. And didn't want to stress out her mom. And so later in life, she kind of went, well, I can't ask my mother to do anything because she can't help me. Right. So she didn't have anybody help her for anything. And so she felt it was all on her own and how to go through life.
Right.
And it was a huge paradigm shift for her at age 42.
Wow. Okay. So, Walt, you're talking about the beginnings of the hole in the soul. I'm sure this child was a little bit older than 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, 6 month, because she had cognitive abilities to understand what was going on with mother, and she didn't want to distress the mother.
Right.
But children do pick up on the fact that the mother is not available. Right. And so when they get into this hopeless state of shutdown, then they become these, I call them closed down membranes, and the defense mechanisms, these early defense mechanisms, start to build. And when people close down in that way, they can't let in the light, they can't let in the emotional nutrients, and of course they lose trust in the world.
To read this a little farther, it says child maltreatment causes stress that can disrupt early brain development, and serious chronic stress can harm the development of the nervous and immune systems.
Absolutely.
As a result, children who are abused or neglected are at higher risk of health problems as adults. They may be alcoholism, depression, drug addiction, eating disorders, obesity, high-risk sexual behaviors, smoking, suicide, and certain chronic diseases. So the goal here is for the child to feel safe.
Right,
and stability.
And stability. It's consistency, stability.
Yes.
And when that hole in the soul is activated later on in life, when there's an abandonment or there's a life stressor, then that original hole gets reactivated again. And then that causes a lot of chaos, which we'll talk about down the line in panel 4. But you can see that in looking at panel 1, you see this occluded eye, and the occluded eye represents the disconnect between the mother and the infant, and the sense of fractured perception that the child is now being infiltrated with, if you will, because that is exactly how we form a sense of self.
Right.
It is through the eyes of our mother that we form a healthy eye, a healthy sense of self. So when that lack of connection is not there, how can we do that?
Well, here's a statistic for you. 14% of all men in U.S. prisons and 36% of all women in prisons were abused.
Well,
childhood.
is that a big surprise?
No,
Right.
not so much.
Okay.
The surprising part is that over twice as many women than men are.
Twice as many.
Women are in prison from admitting, have abuse. And
Okay.
again, I'm sure those numbers are conservative, but nonetheless, there's proof right there.
So everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Yes.
And so I spend a lot of my time in treatment with playing what I call psychological detective. And I take the symptoms and I use these symptoms as ways to track what happened, who done it, what happened in that early phase of the development. Because until we really get a hold of that, until we really start to deal with the wound and clean the wound, which we will talk about later on in the process of the mind map, we're really stuck with it. And so what happens is we ingest it, and then we turn symptomatic, and we have all kinds of reactions to it, and it gets buried in the fiber of our being, and then later on gets expressed in all kinds of negative core beliefs, which we started getting into on previous episodes. But we can now see that the hole in the soul is caused by the neglect. Did you say there were 4 of them? Neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse,
Emotional
and
abuse,
emotional
and
abuse.
then the needs, of course, of the child.
Right.
And if you have issues with this regard, good or bad, we really, really, really would like to hear from you.
Yes,
and
this is a call-in show.
Yeah, it is a call-in show, and you can call us at area code 323-843-2826. 843-2826 in the 323 area. Or if you don't want to speak to us but want to ask a question, you can go to info@drjudywtf.com and reread everything that comes in.
And Walt, you were talking about the response of the brain to this disconnect, and it is so that the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, the left being the logical brain and the right being the emotional brain, the left hemisphere doesn't kick in till later.
Right.
And as some of my colleagues say, it doesn't go on, how do you say, when it isn't uploaded in the computer.
Well, does that mean are the wires connected, or are they still being developed?
Starting to develop.
Right, starting to still be developed and connected.
Right, and if there's stress on the baby, then these two parts of the brain don't really know how to communicate with each other. And now we're finding that the amygdala, which is the primitive part of our brain, which is the fight and flight part of our brain, when we're not emotionally held, when we're not emotionally attuned to and soothed, will get activated. It's kind of like that first phase of the game, the first 2-3 years of life, it's so crucial. And I can't overemphasize to you, listeners, that the most preventative thing that you can do to raise a healthy child is simply to be there. And oftentimes I will get mothers and fathers who will be very angry at me because they want me to fix their child, or they want me to refer them to a psychiatrist and medicate their symptoms, when indeed their symptoms are a result of mother-infant, father-infant disconnect. So let me give you an example. I have mothers who come to my office, and I'll see all kinds of symptoms, particularly symptoms like separation anxiety, hair pulling, and the like. And then in taking a history, and I do take a full history, and my main questions that I ask is, so Mom, did you breastfeed your baby? Was your baby born prematurely? Were you emotionally there for your baby?
Emotionally present.
Meaning, were you present? Were you not in a depressed state? Were you not in an anxious state? Were you not on drugs? The like, okay? Because emotional presence requires a clean, clear mind so that you can make that connection with the baby. So I ask these questions, and they're difficult questions sometimes for the mother to answer, because of course they're going to get defensive. Of course they're feeling that they're being blamed and shamed. And I really do want to reiterate that this is not a blame-shame model.
No, it's not.
This is really a reparative model so that the mother can get involved in healing the disconnect between herself and her child. And I have many techniques that I use to do this. We will get into this later because it's super interesting, and it's
fascinating.
very effective. And
it is.
And and I've taken what I used to do in years down to a couple of months worth of work, and it's really, really quite reinforcing.
What that
for me
really
to
means
watch
and
the
implies, folks,
process.
is that the mind map, the 9-panel mind map that Judy's developed, really gets to the meat of the issue rather rapidly. And while it's painful for a short period of time, the results are lasting. So you're not in therapy forever. And it's like a Band-Aid, right? When you pull off a Band-Aid, what's the best way to pull off a Band-Aid? Short, really, really, really quick, or slow?
You know, for the parents that are listening, please understand that you can really be an integral part of healing your child, and
Yes,
that
absolutely.
oftentimes we don't know the damage that we're doing. And we talk about childhood being a, you say it, Walt, you like to say it so often.
Childhood really is a hostage situation, which I still think we should call the show that. But anyway,
Great title.
it's a great title. But you know, there's a lot of myths about child abuse as well. I've got 4 of them, I believe, and one of them is that it's only abuse is violent, and physical abuse is just one type. Neglect and emotional abuse are just as damaging, since they're more subtle and others less likely to intervene, because you can't see it.
And I just wanted to comment about that. Oftentimes children will act out because they want the attention. They'd rather be bad and get some sort of attention
None
than
at
to
all.
be ignored. It's much more painful to be ignored and disconnected from.
Yeah. Myth number 2 is only bad people abuse their children. While it's easy to say that only bad people abuse children, it's not so black and white. Not all abusers are intentionally harming their children. Many have been victims of abuse themselves and don't know any other way to be a parent. Others may be struggling with mental and health issues or substance abuse problems.
Yes. So I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh, I'm going to abuse my child. I'm going to create a hole in the soul. That'll be fun. You know, it doesn't work that
absolutely.
way. There's often a multi-generational history of their families being neglectful or physically harmful to them, and it just gets passed down.
It's all they know. I mean, I give you an example of that, a simple, quick example, if you want to hear one. This has kind of been around for a long time. Is a family was getting together for, I believe it was either Christmas or Thanksgiving, and the wife was newly married, and she cut both ends of the ham off, and then put it in the oven. And the husband's looking, going, "What in the world are you doing? Why in the heck are you cutting off both ends of the ham?" Well, that's just the way we always did it at our house. So they called up Mom. Mom says, "Yep, that's how we did it. That we just cut off both ends of the ham and put it in the oven." Called Grandma. Grandma said, "Yeah, that's how we did it. That's what we did. We cut both ends of the ham off." And then Grandma said, and the reason was, and again, you know, going back 4 generations, right? Well, the pan I originally had back in the day didn't fit the whole ham.
Oh my
so the
God.
only way to get the ham into the pan, because I had a small pan because I couldn't afford a bigger one, was to cut both ends off. So as a result, 4 generations later, they're still doing what my mom did and cutting both ends of the ham off so it fits in the pan.
And all we're doing is asking why.
And
'Cause
that's
that's
it.
a really important question.
And they had to go back 4
Okay.
generations and get this answer, right? I mean, it could be something as simple as that.
I
right?
love that example. That's such
And it's a
great
true story.
example.
And it's a true story. It's like, well, I watch my mom every Christmas, every Thanksgiving cut. Wait, why? That's because my mom does. We always did it that way.
And you know what's astounding is that we normalize behaviors that are not really natural, and we call them okay because we've been doing them for generations and generations. Case in point, there was a method of letting the child cry it out called the Ferber method. We talked about that.
Yes.
And the Ferber method
Ferber.
was about allowing the child to build character by letting he or she cry it out. And it really was more for the parents than it was for the child, because the premise was that you've got to let your baby cry, because then the baby's going to run your life. And so if you want to have a normal life and you want to sleep through the night, then you've got to start training your child to cry it out and hold its emotions and self-soothe. And just the very opposite is true.
Yes.
Because
Self-soothing.
right. In order for a baby to learn how to self-soothe, they have to be soothed. And a baby cannot, a newborn cannot soothe.
No, they have no
himself.
tools or
There's
concept.
no way.
They have to learn by example.
Right. And
Yeah.
so when you stress an baby's emotions out to this degree, what happens is they get overly anxious, and that they learn
Yes.
that their world is not soothing, not safe, not something that they can really rely on. And the last thing you want to do is stress out a baby, because again, the brain function, okay, these dendrites and all of the brain chemicals are starting to balance,
Yeah.
and the
Connect.
neurons and so on, and the corpus callosum, the connective pathway between the left and the right hemisphere. And we are psychobiological creatures, meaning that our psychology and the way we are treated interacts with our biology, and then when the treatment doesn't go right, then everything messes up chemically, neurologically, and so on. And so I can't overemphasize being there for your children. One of the things that's very challenging for me as a psychologist is dealing with mothers who have to or do put their children in daycare. And this is really, really tough, because mothers will feel really judged by me, and I tell them that I'm not nature. I'm just reporting on nature, and nature is very specific. Nature requires that for a healthy human psyche to be formed, you need consistency, eye contact, and you need a primary caregiver to be doing this. You can't have a bunch of multiple caregivers stepping in and doing the caregiving, because this is called attachment. You want to form a healthy bond to a primary attachment figure.
Lifelong attachment.
And that means if it's father, then it's father. And that means that if the primary person is going to be the stay-at-home dad, that's fine. It's just that once you establish that father has to stay at home and be there consistently. If the mother goes to work and she wants to come in every 8 hours or so, as long as the baby has that primary attachment figure that's consistent throughout the first few years of life, then the baby can form secure attachment. So again, parents listening, please call in. I want to hear from you. This is a call-in show.
Yes, it is. 323-843-2826. And so you're saying, doctor, it's nature and nurture?
It's nature and nurture, right. And the big battle, nature, nurture, and we have to understand that we are the cause of the outcome of our children's lives. Be the Cause, which is the name of my entire mind map system, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, is really speaking to the fact that we are not the cause of part one of our lives. We are at the effect of, remember, we are like these sponges soaking in the world, and if what's coming into us, if what's being infiltrated into us is a bunch of darkness, neglect, abuse, emotional, physical, then we're going to sponge that in, and we're going to have some pretty intense reactions to that, and then some pretty negative core beliefs blueprinting off of that. So remember, if you want a healthy human being, you've got to follow nature.
Well, and remember, the most important thing is there's two parts here. There's a beginning and a finish, right? I mean, okay, so the first part of life that you had no control over is kind of messed up, right?
Right.
Okay, and we all know that if you continue to look in your rearview mirror, if you're driving a car and you focus on the rearview mirror and look, I had a messed up childhood, all you're going to get at is crashed. You're going to crash.
Right.
The issue is not how you start, but how you finish.
Right. So this system is not really about being stuck in analysis
absolutely
paralysis
not.
and trying to figure out what happened, but it really is about moving you through the wound and healing the wound and taking responsibility for the outcome of part two of your life, which is where you get to be the cause. So this is really a from through to model, from the wound and the reaction to the wound and the encoding of the wound, and through the process of dismantling the old coding and then cracking open the defense mechanisms that sometimes smother us, other times help us, and then eventually taking the whole thing down into instead of imploding and exploding,
You're
really
unloading.
unloading and expressing, and not projecting onto other people or hurting yourself by suppressing the
Again,
feelings.
the best example is we get into further panels and you listen to them all. It's really a paradigm shift, right? Instead of cutting both ends of the ham off and throwing it in the oven, it's better just to leave it alone and put it in its entirety. But in order for you to do that, if all you've learned is cutting both ends of the ham off, is you have to go back, figure out what the challenge is, what the problem is, what the cause was,
Right.
and then work on a solution. And typically, at least from what little I've gathered from Judy from my hanging out with her, is the solution is rather permanent. We're not talking about, again, as it's a short-term situation, and the transformations are phenomenal. I mean, this is not a foolproof guaranteed gig, but hey, it works. And getting back to the myths and facts of child abuse, I got a couple more. Child abuse doesn't happen in good families. Child abuse doesn't always happen in poor families and bad neighborhoods. It crosses all racial, economic, and cultural lines. Sometimes families who seem to have it all on the outside are hiding a different story behind closed doors on the inside. And I got a couple of more myths regarding child abuse. Most child abusers are strangers. While abusers by strangers do happen, most abusers are family members or others close to the family. Because again, if we're dealing with non-physical but emotional and neglect and whatnot, that's typically with family members.
And Walt, that brings to light the fact that it is so important to be so close to your child and not give the child over to multiple caregivers. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from parents who found out that their child was sexually abused by a housekeeper, and now they have to pay the consequence. The whole family has to pay the consequence of
for
that.
a long time.
Not that every housekeeper is a child abuser.
No,
However,
and that's myth number 5. Abused
Right.
children always grow up to be abusers. Not the case. Okay, strong motivation to protect their child against what they went through, and they become excellent parents is also motivation. Yeah. And some of the effects of child abuse and neglect really quickly are, I mean, we've talked about a lot of it, but one is lack of trust and in relationship difficulties. You have disconnected. You're having challenges connecting with anybody. Core feelings of feeling worthless and being damaged. And if you have that belief, it's really not your fault that you're not worthy or that you feel worthless. That's basically how you were trained growing up before you even knew you were being trained. And the only way to do that is to pull out that virus and reboot the software and put something else in. And the way to do that is through Dr. Judy and the Mind Map. And she's having a special that's doing through Yelp, and it's half price. So if you want to call her office, you can. And her telephone number, again, in the LA area, she actually does phone therapy, and we're working on Skype as well, is area code 310-739-4491. That's Dr. Judy's direct telephone number, area 310-739-4491. And mention that you heard us from the show. She will call you back, and you're dealing directly with Dr. Judy. Okay, so if you want to be rebooted, rewired, and realize, hey, I'm having these awful, awful feelings, and I just can't shake it. My inner voice, which we talked about last week, is, I'm not worthy, I'm worthless, nobody loves me, I'm unlovable. We went through a whole list, and there's going to be a list in her book. It's really not anything you can overcome. The willpower ain't going to cut it. You need to do some rebooting and some pulling out of the virus that you've got and replace it with something. And the transformation is so worth it. Is so worth it.
And the beauty of the work that I do is that I'm able to take the symptoms that people present me with and really source it back to cause. Today I was working with a young woman, and she was telling me that she has insomnia and anxiety, and in looking into it further, it turns out that her mother was quite emotionally unavailable to her. And so we talked about the fact that when we get up in the morning, our defenses are down. And so the infant piece of ourselves, we always carry that inner child, that inner infant. And so when life stresses us a little bit more, or when we're waking up in the morning and we're coming out of our dream state, it's a state of vulnerability. And so these primitive feelings will be right there in on the surface, available to us, so that we could see the anxiety, the insomnia is caused by this anxious attachment, this lack of attunement. So then she can see that she's not crazy, she's not sick. She can understand that she wasn't properly attuned to, and then she has to grieve the loss of this piece of the parenting that she didn't have, and learn how to soothe herself and to express the hurt and the pain around the failure to give this particular narcissistic supply, emotional supply, if you will.
And lastly, I want to finish the effects of child abuse and neglect is trouble regulating emotions.
Right.
Abused children cannot express emotions safely. As a result, emotions get stuffed down, coming out in unexpected ways. Adult survivors of child abuse can struggle with unexplained anxiety, depression, and anger, which we've just talked about.
Right.
They may turn to alcohol and drugs to numb the pain as well.
Right, so this is a case of inability to regulate affects, our affects. Our parents are supposed to regulate our affects, so if they don't do it for us, then how the hell are we supposed to learn how to regulate our affects? And if we can't regulate our affects, then we try to pull it out of the environment, and we use drugs, sex, rock and roll, whatever. Today I was very privileged to be in a study group, and a group of professionals led by Dr. Walter Brockelmans, who I hope he's listening. Call in, Walt, please.
Hey, doctor.
And we talked about being addicted to porn. And so, again, these symptoms of addiction, porn, alcohol, any kind of addiction, fills that hole in the soul, because what we want really is the stimulation of that good feeling, of the dopamine that calms us, and the other drug that stimulates us. And so when we don't have the ability to regulate our affect, then we're going to use outside sources to do that for us. And then we get into trouble. You know, we get DUIs, and we end up in rehab, and we ruin our relationship because we're on the computer looking for porn, looking for better and better porn that's going to get us higher and higher and higher, because it's never high enough. And then we get bored with that particular picture, and we've got to move the file along and get something even better, and it's a never-ending cycle. And again, it goes back to panel 1, cause. It's the causal panel. I call it the motherboard. I call it the control panel of the rest of our lives. And that's how serious it is. So if your parents, take it really seriously and understand that the best thing you can do, and you can save yourself a lot of money by not having to put your child later on into therapy, and avoid the whole treatment plan, because you are the treatment plan. You are the treatment plan. You're the soother. You're the consistent nurturer. You're the ones that can give the eye contact and the skin contact and the breastfeeding. And there's nobody else that will really, really care to attune to the baby as much as a healthy parent, because they want to. They're built. We're wired to connect. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a very special guest on our show. His name is Dr. Stan Tatkin, and I'm looking forward to meeting him.
He's written a really amazing book entitled, several books, but the one is called Wired for Love.
Yes,
and
Wired for Love.
It's a great book. It's primarily a relationship book. And so this basically concludes panel 1, which is really the origin, the beginnings of the wound, and the darkest point and part. Next week, we're going to address a little bit more about the light, because the only way you can get out of the darkness is with the light, right? And how we react to the wound. So and so we are now at our point of shrinking that tune. And again, if you want to have a session with Dr. Judy or talk to her, her direct telephone number is area code 310-739-4491. And she's available usually morning, noon, and night. Oh, just kidding.
Well, not all night, but I'll return your calls.
We are in a shrink-a-tune, and it's from a group called Image Dragons, and the title of the song is Reactive.
Radioactive.
A radioactive. I can't read today.
It's okay.
I can trace, though, I promise. Radioactive. And so I'm going to read the song, and then we're going to play it. And
one of my favorite songs, Imagine Dragons, Radioactive. I believe they played it at the Grammys, and it's such a powerful, powerful song, and I chose it because I love it, and it also reminds me of the wounds of childhood. So go ahead and read
Whoa, 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 whoa. I am waking up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on the prison bus. That is the apocalypse. Whoa.
Whoa. Okay.
Whoa.
So if we're going to take the darkness of childhood, and by the way, I know there's a lot of light too, so we just try to today emphasize the darker side of the light because we're talking about the wounds. So as you know, we start our show off with Club to Death?
Yes, the title of the song we play, I meant to mention that, is Club to Death, which, interestingly enough, is from The Matrix. I modified a little bit, and it's in the original Matrix movie. And actually, some feel it's one of the top 20 theme songs of all time for movies.
Well, also the mind map is a matrix, isn't it?
Yes,
So
it
we
is.
chose that, I think, unconsciously, and then
I
I
did.
went, whoa, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa, whoa.
I did. I picked it
That's
unconsciously of sorts.
interesting that
Yeah.
you chose that. So back to the radioactive words. I'm waking up to ash and dust. So here we are born, and childhood is a hostage situation. So in some cases, we truly are waking up to ash and dust. We're now blinded by the light of birth, and so what do we find? Doctors sucking out the mucus from our mouth and giving us tests, and all kinds of things are going on. I wipe my brow, I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals of the air, because of course we are in polluted environments, so we're not just getting the purity of the mother's oxygen. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on the prison bus. Okay, so again, the prison bus,
There it
we're
is.
locked in there.
There it is.
We
Locked
are
in.
hostages.
Locked in.
And we're in the apocalypse of childhood now.
Yes, we are.
So-
But you know what? I'm waking up. I feel it in my bones. Enough to make my system blow. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. Whoa. I'm radioactive, radioactive.
Yeah, well, isn't this a generation of radioactivity? So
sure
not
is.
are we talking about the radioactivity and the darkness of being an infant in the arms of a mother who may not be the healthiest, but we also have a lot of radioactivity in our air supply. So welcome to the new age. Things are not that pure. We're not really that attuned to nature. We're not attuned to the needs of our children, our babies. So we're blowing the systems, and the babies are feeling it down to the core of their bones.
I raise my flags, don my clothes. It's a revolution, I suppose. We'll paint it red to fit right in. Whoa. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on the prison bus. This is the apocalypse. Whoa.
So speaking of red flags, we spoke a lot today about the wounds of childhood, neglect, sexual abuse, so on. I raise my flags. There are all kinds of red flags. Yes, it is a revolution in the sense that a baby and a mother are supposed to be a very, very integrated
Yes.
force, right? And sometimes they're not. So sometimes there's this kind of a revolution going on.
And we're back to the chorus. Again, this is Image Dragons, Radioactive. I'm waking up. I feel it in my bones. Enough to make my system blow. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. And whoa, I'm radioactive. So that's the song, and that's our show. Next week, we are going to delve into panel 2 of Dr. Judy's Mind Map. And so stay tuned for that. And if you want to talk to her, you sure can call her directly, area 310. I lost the number. I know it's 310. I call all the time, but it's in my phone. 739-4491. That's 739-4491 in the 310 area code. Or you can email us at info@drjudywtf.com. And, of course, you can pull our previous shows on Stitcher and iTunes and, of course, here at UBN Radio.
And thank you so much for listening.
Thank
Our
you so
audience
much, everyone.
is building, and I really
yes.
appreciate every one of you for tuning in.
Yep. And so that's our show, and here's our tune.